taking forward the conversations, we will, if I may, get to Komoto-san from his research and technologies. Komoto-san, we've seen your work that points out that Japanese companies should focus on innovation on alternate energy and shift their business model towards building low carbon carbon neutral economy. Some of the projections that your result research also point out, the Vice Minister was also referring to the kinds of sources that energy that you will get. Given that we're talking about the bilateral cooperation and how the near future looks like, how do you think that the biggest challenge in this current scenario when we're talking about economic growth as well as then the energy security issues? So what are the kind of findings that you have that the government and the private sector can do these countries?
Thank you for the question, but quite difficult answer. Because I'm in the field of renewable, especially PV, for a long time. On the other hand, I'm so looking at what happens in the world for the energy supply, security, and so on. So recently, in the world, for example, some accident in Middle East and so on happened to us. We are worrying about what happens in the near future. From viewpoint energy security, so also that in Japan we have huge resources. Most of the fuel are coming from the overseas. Therefore, we need to promote the renewable energy. And the important issue, maybe this is the same situation in India. How we should treat nuclear. Japanese energy policy strongly depends upon the degree of the nuclear energy. Of course, from my personal viewpoint, I like to promote the renewable first. But sometimes the supplemental energy source is necessary. Might be gas, might be nuclear. The only thing I have no clear answer. I think so. Also, India has still been growing year by year. Also, contractually, Japan, India has now the number of population is increasing year by year. This means the economic capacity is scaling up, or the economic growth should be enough. On the other hand, in Japan, the population would be reduced. So our target is how to sustain the current economic activity. Quite a different situation. But we have important issues how we choose the self-coordinate by our energy security and several kind of supply chain and so on. And so that's basically work on one issue from viewpoint PV. So this is not in the field of two specific fields in the PV. The one is end-of-life management. The other is how to use PV in the transport. As for the end-of-life management, recently India has a big concern to promoting recycling and so on. So recently India started the tender for the technology and new projects. As for the recycling technology in Japan, NEDO has been taking a lead of the R&D, and based on their projects, several companies already being commercialized in Japan. So such technology could be provided to India, might be the cooperation or some license business could be possible, I think. And another topic I'm thinking is PV in the transport. So when I looked at the invitation of this event, so it said the Suzuki model. So Suzuki is a very famous automotive company. I think so now we are trying to how to use PV on the automotive, especially the passenger car and private vehicle and so on. So if in India, Suzuki could use the PV on the roof, the big potential in India, that I'm expecting. And also some said that conventional technology and the new technology. In the field of the PV transport, in the land transport, so we are now looking for two approaches. So one is the PV for the passenger vehicle. This is quite a new technology because it will be difficult to install with keeping a good design and the consumer's comfort. And of course, the automotive company has not been accepted yet because of the economic aspects. This is quite challenging, so we need some new technology and new approaches for it. On the other hand, recently in Japan, we could see the PV utilization on the truck or rail. This is quite easy technology, conventional technology. And last year, another little project, our team has calculated in a few years, the investment of PV could be recovered. Because almost the flight truck is using the diesel for the air conditioning and the cooling system and so on. If PV electricity could provide such field directly, the truck could reduce the fuel consumption, diesel consumption. So we try to calculate it could be the case. In Japan, some local transport company are starting to install PV contracts. This is quite easy because not so new technology. I think this, so India has big potential to use the transport. Of course, like you see the train and so on. So if such the field, one of the big potential collaboration between Japan.
Thank you. We move to Ms. Gauri Johar. Ms. Johar, you have been dealing with the issues of making strategies, looking at the finance and the infrastructure. The finance and the infrastructure requirements as well. In terms of when we look at some of the transition pathways that that are there in Europe and USA, how do you reckon that the transition pathways, the kind of needs and aspirations that different points of Asia have, and also if you could talk about how does the India-Japan bilateral partnership, some of the good things that have already happened. If you're looking at Suzuki for solar model, how do you think that this bilateral partnership can make a big difference for the global south at large, not just the countries? Your perspective is
Thank you. Thanks for having S&P Global and myself here, represented for the International Solar Alliance Indo-Japan panel. Thanks for those questions. I'll do it in two parts. One is, your first question was on transition pathways. And sitting here, I just got reminded of when the DG Mr. Ashish Khanna asked about mature technologies or new technologies. I think when we look at policies, it's a continuum. And it's very difficult to, or it's not optimal for policies to artificially select technologies or to artificially say, we will incentivize this and we will not incentivize this. And it reminds me of actually a Japanese concept which I love called Kaizen, which is continuous improvement. And I think Kaizen it's a concept that I think in Indian manufacturing, across Indian manufacturing sector, there are a lot of industries which apply Kaizen. The spirit of continuous improvement is to see what is the best mix of mature and new technologies. And as someone said earlier, also here on the panel, where do we need to scale up? Where do we need the demonstration projects? The other aspect about transition is that we need all technologies, renewable and fossil in play. Because, for instance, when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow, what happens? Till we have batteries at scale and commercial, we do need to understand how does thermal still operate at not just technical minimums, but really support the grid and make sure that the grid is still functioning with full integrity. And I think that is where, my colleague Travis is here, who's a solar expert, more than me. And, we were just talking on our way here on the Shinkansen, and we were just discussing that, he was sharing with me that how there are parts in Japan where curtailment is happening right now. So my question is that, how in those situations where there is excess solar in certain parts of Japan, I think the policy which I would love to understand and use case I would love to understand from an India perspective, because it's something we struggle with, is, as you know very well, is that how do we utilize our thermal capacities well, which include gas, for instance. We have the eternal challenge in India about how to utilize gas and LNG into power. And I think Japan does that very well. When you look at Japan mix, it's coal, gas, LNG, and nuclear. So how does thermal provide that optimal backup and the mix of coal and gas? Because in India also we deal with the question of coal. How to clean the coal fleet, how to phase it out, and you're very well aware of those. So I think it'll be interesting to understand from our Japanese counterparts on how does it really work and how does it work, both from a policy perspective but from an execution perspective as well. So I think because those are some of the things we really struggle with. Like right now, I'm part of a task force in Delhi on gas to power, and the US-India corridor is looking at it. So let the Japan-India corridor also look at it. Let's join forces there, and that's a very live situation we are trying to understand. The second one, I think, which you stop honing again on the India-Japan, I think the DG said a very good thing that in the beginning that to frame that the ISA is very unique because it is the largest multilateral organization by treaty which is set up in the global south. But it is also a convening platform for the global north to come and share the playbooks and see how those can be adapted in the global south. And I think that is where this is a great opportunity to bring that discussion of the global north into the global south and see, what are the lessons learned, both successes and failures. We learn from failures as well. So I think it's important to keep that spirit alive. But I do like to go back to Kaizen. I just thought of it sitting here, actually.
Absolutely. And maybe on your point on the learnings from Japan, maybe Toshiba's partnership with NTT, Panasonic, which Hamaguchi-san can talk about. I understand that there is also the partnership is being, there is a display also that is on-site hydrogen supply chain that is happening at the expo site. And we would love to also hear the perspectives from Hamaguchi-san. But before Hamaguchi-san, I understand that Ketan has raised his hand. Ketan, if I may ask him to come in here.
I'm here.
Yeah.
I just wanted to comment on something very important. If we're looking at energy systems, most members of the International Solar Alliance are countries from the global south, which could leapfrog into the energy transition in a totally different way in developed countries, like Japan, for instance. And I think it's very interesting to have that combination of India on one side and Japan on the other one, to cover all possible aspects of the difficulties that we will face in the coming years towards complete decarbonization of the energy systems. And I really think ISA has a tremendous role to play in bringing the energy transition and accompanying the energy transition in emerging countries by leapfrogging from the very unstable, undeveloped energy systems and power grids that we see in many systems to something much smarter without going through what we have seen in different countries in the last years. And that's a tremendous opportunity for, I would say, very smart and innovative solutions, especially in terms of grid forming, grid stability. We have a tremendous role to play in the coming years. And I think ISA is perfectly positioned for that. But again, when we look at the development of the PV sector, but also energy transition, we see relatively little cases of massive development in emerging economies, and that's, in my opinion, where what's happening in key countries, I'm thinking about Ethiopia, for instance, with regards to electric mobility, for instance, might have a tremendous role to play as an example towards how to accelerate the energy transition. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. And thank you, Nathan, for pointing out the importance for the global south. Hamaguchi-san, your perspectives, from Toshiba's experience on broader energy solutions, including energy storage and other technologies that are supporting renewable energy and a circular economy, would be useful. Also with us, one goes from the Waseda University. Yeah. So, Kondo-san, your work on on the so what DGIC was also talking about the new technologies and the need for harmonized international standardization. Your work on the solar heat coefficient, which is an important indicator for the performance of the building envelope components. If you could talk us about the results that you have obtained, which can probably shape up international standard on the calorimetric solar heat coefficient methodology. That would be good to hear.
Yeah, thank you. I think the international standard is the common part of the technology specification or the requirement. And this is a minimum requirement, common and minimum requirements. And as I mentioned, India is in a very harsh environment. So therefore, not all standards cannot all the requirements that are needed in India. So therefore, you need, say, some additional local variation of the international standard. But it's a little bit questionable. So then what is needed for local environment? So one example is that we have investigated the high temperature performance and influence of the high temperature for reliability. So therefore, for adapting to this harsh environment, we finally found that we need a new test condition for PV panels aimed at such a harsh environment. So for example, the testing temperature should be higher by 10 or 20 degrees C as compared to the international standard. So depending on the local environment. So such a kind of the discussion, we need some local data. And as I mentioned, such a demonstration data in such a local environment. So, but of course, the too much, the stringent, the local requirement, that may cause the violation of the WTO. So that we need to be a little bit careful, but proper the localization or the variation, depending on the local environment, is quite important for the healthy growth of the industry and market in each area. So that could be the one possible area for the bilateral cooperation between Japan and India. Thank you.
Thank you, Kondo-san. And related to this, we also move to Dr. Pranab Borua. Dr. Borua, your work with more on the legal side, to deal with the laws that are forming and enabling this transition, particularly in the context of Japan, and the learnings that would be relevant for other countries in the global south. Where do you see the more awareness, more engagements, more visibility on the legal issues that are needed in this sector, as we are talking about multiple switches between technologies, testing new technologies, looking at the commercialization and then the execution side. Your perspectives from how important the law side of things are.
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to this very, I think, timely event. I'm from an organization called Client Earth. It's an environmental law group, actually, that working to advocate for basically very ambitious climate action and supporting the energy transition. So, I mean, if you talk about currently what you call the climate action and transformative change, you're talking about transformative change and systemic change. I think the two sectors that are super important after policy is finance and law, because you need the money on the ground and need to have the regulations and laws aligned. I think that's aligned to also the discussion that our colleague talked about standard development. It's all about regulations and whether we violate WTO rules or align to WTO rules. Also, it's about regulation. But in terms of regulations that we should be really, I think, focusing on, that I'd like to talk about. First of all, in the national context, I think when you talk about renewables or solar PV expansion, I think one area is, of course, scaling up the production of solar PV and its integration to the national energy system. So that's where one of the key aspects is how also the grid connection or grid expansion actually evolved with the expansion of solar PV, and that's where regulation is quite important. That we actually we need to actually think about that for this new paradigm, how the regulations around grid connection, grid connectivity actually evolves. Because right now, all the regulations are designed for centralized production and supply. But with solar PV, you are also talking about distributed, decentralized production. So that means the individual producers have to also benefit and able to connect to the grid and benefit from, the production they are sending to the grid. And that also opens up new opportunities in terms of new businesses. For example, we are talking about vehicle-to-grid kind of technologies. Also, in the future, that requires new regulations. For example, with also more demand-side management, I think new regulations has to be in place. So that is one aspect. And another one is, I think, also regulations, or I'll say encouragement in terms of involving the financial sector. Because currently, in most of the discussion, the financial sector is actually coming towards the end of the pipeline. but they should be involved in from the very beginning, because they are the one who is going to finance most of the transition, and they are going to bring the money. So they should know actually where they are putting the money and what kind of regulations are there. So I think they should be involved into the process in the energy policy development and the regulatory development from the beginning. And I see that regulations in this area also quite important in terms of like encouraging them to invest more. That means also changes within the financial sector or asset management sector. So, for example, in Japan, what we are trying to promote is that better transition planning for the private sector, where investments to the low carbon areas in solar PV is actually encouraged. That's on the national side. I think on the international side aspects, I think there are a lot of things to consider, especially like I think our colleague said, context is very important. Context in Africa and context in Asia or India, context in Japan is very different, and that's where regulations comes into play. And I think in that context also, I would say regulations around import of solar PV is more and more important, because India can produce solar PV for Japan, but when they try to import, there are a lot of aspects that you have to consider about standards, about in terms of local content, a lot of things. So that's why I think development of the standards and regulations together is the job, or I'll say can be also purview of ESA, facilitating development of these common standards and the regulations to facilitate that kind of value chain development. So I think I'll stop there because there are so many other aspects you can talk about in the interest of time.
No, thank you, Dr. Bolwa. That was interesting, and when we have Mr. Joshua Wycliffe, conclude the session, I think some of the reflections from myself we will get to hear. But Dr. Bolwa, the context in different countries that we are talking about and how it is different. We have online Mr. Frank Wan, who is the president for the Sino-American Silicon Products. He is connected with us from Taiwan. Mr. Wan, you can hear us? Mr. Wan, if you unmute yourself. With the 120, 124 member countries, the sun never sets for ISA. And with that in mind, the kind of competitiveness, commercialization, and the involvement that we are looking at, the involvement of the private sector that we are looking at to carry the baton for ISA, shoulder to shoulder. I think the CEO Caucus at the Osaka Trade Expo has been has brought in the right dimensions of the private sector conversation to happen, and Mr. Wan, can you now hear us, see us? You have to unmute yourself.
Hello, hi, I can hear, sorry.
Yes. So, Mr. Wan, just before one of the panelists was mentioning on the context of the various countries and how the need for standardization and the role that ISA can play to create harmonization in these standards. Mr. Bhuvan, you are already practicing this multiculture, and you're supplying your both manufacturing and supplying your goods for the clean energy transition. We would want to hear your perspectives on the kind of challenges and opportunities that you see for the private sector to take forward the clean energy transition, particularly in the Asia context?
Okay, just to share some of my opinion. Of course, we were majorly in Taiwan, and the RE 100 requirement make our green energy become essential here. So I think Taiwan is quite booming up. In the meantime, Japan, I understand that there is also some progress. So basically, I think Japan is quite okay. Of course, India is one of the market that we're thinking. In fact, we're thinking about not thinking about. We actually have some partners that sorry I cannot reveal the name at this moment, but we're discussing some of the partnership that in India. So hopefully we understand there's some solar and green energy market there. So hopefully we should have some progress within this team.
Thank you, Mr. Owan. And with that, colleagues, friends who are in the room, who have joined us online, we have ran out of time, and I would hand over to Mr. Joshua Wycliffe, who is the Chief of Operations of ISA, and to only with the word that the commitment and the recommendations and the suggestions that the panels have provided. I'm sure emerging from the land of the rising sun would add more power to IC's great work on the clean energy transition. And on behalf of my colleague Geetan from the Vikram Institute and the Teddy family, we'd also like to thank the International Solar Alliance to have got this duo of Vikram Institute and Teddy to power the CEO Caucus for the International Solar Alliance. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and over to Mr. Joshua Wycliffe.
Good afternoon. I'm sorry we've already run out of time. Make it fast. And, I'll pick on your comment that you said about sun never sets on eyesight. I mean, that's a very big statement, a very meaningful statement as well. It just gives us a great opportunity to, I mean, just today's session alone has been such a wonderful, amazing session where the perspectives of across the borders, people that we've heard. I've always believed that a caucus isn't successful until the outcomes of the caucus are realized. And how they're realized are, you go out of this place with clear vision as to how you could progress this forward. We spoke about the DG when he started, he spoke about the collaboration between two countries, the industrialists from two countries. Suzuki Automobile was made as an example. Questions as to who would be the next Suzuki. In my mind, I was thinking it would be a few Suzukis. Does that just So, turning to our distinguished panelists and speakers, thank you so much for your valuable time, sharing your valuable perspectives. It's just been so amazing, like I said, to listen, and there are so many opportunities that just came out of these few minutes of discussion that we have. And I really hope, as panelists, you would take away what we discussed to your industrial groups, to your own tables wherever you are, and continue to seek opportunities and explore how we could collaborate and bring this all up together. And I just don't want to stop there. There are a few perspectives and contexts that we discussed. We spoke about policy and regulation and what a great role it plays, because with some senior bureaucrats, one of them was saying, you put your mouth where the money is, and without policy, there is no money, there is no investments. So that's very, very clear that if we have to collaborate, we collaborate together. And also we talk about market creation, creating a value chain, supply chains. very important because that's what the world needs. Almost every platform I go and address or speak or listen, they talk about how we could and we should diversify supply chains. And here's another opportunity that both nations can work together. I also want to thank the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy of India, even though they were not able to be here to allow us to get into this. ITPO, JICA, JETRO, NIDO, and also JBIC. And all of the institutions, stakeholders who actually supported this event and enriched it with your expertise, with your thoughts, and your commitment. Like I said, I really hope we can engage going forward and bring forth meaningful outcomes as well. And also this venue that has been provided to us, we want to thank people for that. And this is turning out to be a hub of innovation and industry and a symbol that what can be achieved with technology, but not just technology, but cooperation as well. So let's carry forward this momentum and prepare for the next phase of our journey. So we all have not just meaningful discussions, but see the outcomes in the world that we look forward to. Thank you all again. Thank you very much.